A missing prince, a dark secret, and a story Disney never wanted you to see. The Lion King holds more mysteries than you'd expect, and one of them centers around a character that should have changed everything. While you might think Kiara was Simba's only child, the truth is far more complicated. Before Kiara, there was another heir to Pride Rock, Simba's firstborn son. His name was Kopa, and his disappearance would reshape everything we know about the Lion King story. But to understand what really happened, we need to look at the evidence Disney left behind. You see, back in 1994, when Lion King fever was at its peak, Disney released a series of official comics. These weren't just random stories, they were canon, approved by Disney themselves. And in these comics, we meet a young prince named Kopa. Just like his father, he was adventurous, curious, and destined to rule Pride Rock. But something happened. Something that would explain one of the biggest mysteries in Lion King 2, why Simba became so overprotective of Kiara. The answer might just be the darkest subplot Disney ever created. In these comics, Kopa wasn't just another character. He was the bridge between two generations. The young prince spent his days exploring the Pridelands with his best friend, Asante, a young female cub. Their friendship was reminiscent of Simba and Nala's, but with one crucial difference. Asante was the daughter of Zira, Scar's most loyal follower. And here's where things take a turn that Disney would never show in their movies. According to multiple sources and fan theories backed by evidence from the comics, Zira, consumed by revenge against Simba for defeating Scar, did the unthinkable. She targeted what Simba loved most, his son. The evidence suggests that Kopa met a tragic fate at Zira's paws, explaining why she was banished to the Outlands with her pride. This wasn't just a random exile, it was punishment for an act so heinous that Disney couldn't include it in their family-friendly sequel. Think about it. In The Lion King 2, Simba's overprotective nature toward Kiara seems extreme, almost paranoid. But when you consider that he'd already lost one child to trust misplaced in the wrong lions, his behavior makes perfect sense. Every time he stops Kiara from exploring, every time he sends Timon and Pumbaa to watch over her, he's not just being controlling, he's terrified of history repeating itself. But the story gets even deeper. The comics show Kopa inheriting not just Simba's adventurous spirit, but also Mufasa's wisdom. Through conversations with his grandfather's spirit, Kopa was learning what it meant to be a true king. His disappearance didn't just rob Pride Rock of an heir, it robbed it of a future leader who was already showing signs of greatness. And here's something that'll blow your mind. Kopa's story might explain one of the most controversial aspects of The Lion King 2. Remember how easily Simba accepted Kovu in the end, despite everything Zira had done? Some fans theorize that Simba saw Kopa in Kovu, another cub who was simply a victim of circumstances and hatred passed down through generations. The official Disney books even describe Kopa as having golden fur like his father and a brown tuft of mane, eerily similar to how Kovu looked as a cub. It's almost as if Disney was leaving breadcrumbs for attentive fans to follow. But perhaps the most chilling evidence comes from the Pridelands themselves. In The Lion King 2, there's a forbidden place that Simba warns Kiara about, the Outlands. While it's presented as dangerous because of the exiled lions, some fans believe it's also where Kopa's tragedy occurred, making it a place of personal trauma for Simba. The implications of Kopa's story reach far beyond just explaining plot holes. It transforms the Lion King franchise from a simple tale about family and responsibility into something much darker. A story about how the cycle of violence and revenge can destroy innocent lives across generations. Think about how different The Lion King 2 would be if Kopa had lived. Would Kiara even exist? Would Simba have been a different kind of father? Would the Pridelands have avoided the near war that almost tore everything apart? These questions haunt the franchise like Mufasa's ghost in the stars. But unlike Mufasa, Kopa's spirit never appears in the night sky. His story remains untold in Disney's official movies, existing only in these supplementary materials that paint a picture too dark for Disney's traditional audience. And maybe that's the real tragedy, not just that Kopa was lost, but that his story was deemed too heavy for the very audience that might have learned the most from it. It's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones left untold. As we look back at the Lion King franchise today, Kopa's absence speaks volumes. It's a shadow that looms over every scene with Simba and Kiara, adding layers of meaning to their interactions that most viewers never realized existed. And it proves that sometimes the most impactful characters in a story are the ones we never see on screen. The tale of the lost Prince of Pride Rock might have been buried in obscure comics and books, but its impact on the story we know and love is undeniable. It stands as a testament to how one untold story can change everything we thought we knew about a classic. And next time you watch The Lion King 2, pay attention to Simba's fears, his protectiveness, his eventual acceptance of Kovu, because now you know there's more to his actions than meets the eye. There's the weight of a loss that Disney never showed us, but one that shaped everything that came after. Remember Kopa, the prince who never got his time to shine on the big screen? Because sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones left in the shadows, waiting for curious minds to discover them. But there's another aspect to this story that makes it even more fascinating: the parallel between Kopa's fate and Mufasa's death. Both were orchestrated by those closest to the throne, both were motivated by revenge and power, and both left deep psychological scars on the survivors. The main difference? While Mufasa's death was shown on screen, becoming one of Disney's most iconic moments, Kopa's story was deemed too dark, even for a franchise that didn't shy away from heavy themes. Let's dive deeper into the evidence found in Disney's companion books. The Lion King 6 New Adventures series, published in 1994, doesn't just mention Kopa, it develops his character in ways that would have made him a fascinating addition to the movies. These books show Kopa learning valuable lessons about leadership, friendship, and the delicate balance of the Pridelands ecosystem. In one particular story, Kopa befriends a young elephant who's struggling with self-confidence. Sound familiar? It's eerily similar to how Kiara later helps Kovu find his own path. This suggests that both of Simba's children inherited his ability to see beyond surface differences and form meaningful connections with others, a trait that could have made Kopa's eventual fate even more impactful. The books also reveal that Kopa had a special bond with Rafiki, much like Simba did. The wise mandrill was teaching him about the circle of life and his future responsibilities as king. This makes you wonder, did Rafiki's seemingly reduced role in The Lion King 2 have something to do with his grief over losing another young prince he had mentored? Here's something that'll make you think twice about everything you thought you knew about the Pridelands: the timing of Kopa's disappearance. Based on the evidence in the comics and books, it likely happened when he was about the same age Simba was when he lost Mufasa. This adds another layer of tragic irony to the story. Both father and son faced their greatest traumas at the same point in their lives. But perhaps the most intriguing evidence comes from the Pridelands geography itself. In The Lion King 2, there's a gorge that looks suspiciously similar to the one where Mufasa met his end. Yet Simba never explicitly forbids Kiara from going there. Instead, his warnings focus entirely on the Outlands. This subtle detail suggests that whatever happened to Kopa occurred in the Outlands, making that territory, not the gorge, the site of Simba's greatest trauma. The presence of Kopa in the official Disney literature also raises questions about the pride's dynamics during that time. The books mention other cubs besides Kopa and Asante, suggesting a thriving pride under Simba's early reign. But by the time we see The Lion King 2, the pride seems smaller, more isolated. Could this be because other families left after Kopa's tragedy, fearing for their own cubs' safety? And let's talk about Nala's role in all of this. In The Lion King 2, she's notably more accepting of Kiara's relationship with Kovu than Simba is. Some fans theorize this is because she knew Asante personally through Kopa and saw firsthand that not all of Zira's family was evil. This adds depth to her character and explains why she often acts as a voice of reason throughout the sequel. There's also the matter of Timon and Pumbaa's behavior in The Lion King 2. Their almost obsessive protection of Kiara makes more sense when you consider they might have failed to protect Kopa. Remember, these were the same carefree characters who raised Simba. Their transformation into helicopter guardians suggests a past trauma they're trying to make up for. The timing of Zira's exile raises even more questions. In The Lion King 2, we're told she was banished for remaining loyal to Scar, but the timeline doesn't quite add up. Why wait so long after Scar's death to exile his followers? Unless something else happened, something so terrible it finally forced Simba's hand, like the disappearance of his firstborn son. Looking at the Pridelands' history through this lens changes everything. Every major decision, every character interaction, every seemingly overprotective move suddenly makes perfect sense. It's not just about Scar's legacy anymore, it's about a father trying to prevent history from repeating itself in the most tragic way possible. The existence of Kopa in Disney's extended universe also adds weight to Zira's character. Her actions weren't just about blind loyalty to Scar, they were calculated moves designed to inflict the maximum possible pain on Simba. By targeting his son, she wasn't just taking revenge, she was trying to break him completely, just as he had broken her by defeating Scar. One of the most haunting aspects of this story is how it mirrors real-world cycles of violence. Just as Scar's death led to Zira's revenge against Kopa, which led to her exile, which led to her raising Kovu as a weapon, each action creates ripples that affect the next generation. It's a sobering reminder of how hatred can poison not just those who hold it, but their children as well. This brings us to another chilling detail, the way Zira treats her own children in The Lion King 2. Her obvious favoritism toward Kovu and disdain for Nuka make more sense when you consider Kopa's story. After losing everything because of her actions against Simba's son, she poured all her hopes for revenge into molding Kovu into the perfect weapon, while Nuka's resemblance to Scar served only as a reminder of her past failures. And speaking of Nuka, his desperate desire to please his mother takes on new meaning when you consider the Kopa situation. Was his fatal attempt to prove himself to Zira partly motivated by knowledge of what she did to Kopa? Did he believe that only by showing the same level of ruthlessness could he win her approval? The revelation of Kopa's existence also sheds new light on the pride's acceptance of Kovu at the end of The Lion King 2. These weren't just lions welcoming a former enemy, they were breaking a cycle of violence that had already claimed one young life. Their ability to move past their prejudices becomes even more powerful when you realize what those prejudices had already cost them. This brings us back to Simba, and perhaps the most profound aspect of his character development. Despite losing his son to Zira's hatred, he ultimately finds it in himself to accept her son as his own. It's not just character growth, it's a father choosing to end a cycle of violence that had already taken everything from him once before. Looking at the franchise through the lens of Kopa's story transforms it from a tale about good versus evil into something far more complex, a story about how trauma shapes us, how fear can control us, and ultimately how forgiveness can free us. It's about the choices we make in the face of unimaginable loss and whether we let our pain define us or guide us toward breaking cycles of violence. The legacy of the Lost Prince lives on, not just in these supplementary materials, but in every frame of The Lion King 2. His absence shaped the Pridelands as surely as his presence would have, proving that sometimes the most powerful characters are the ones we never see. And now, when you watch these movies again, you'll know there's always more to the story than what appears on the surface. Because in the Pridelands, just like in life, every tale casts a shadow, and in those shadows the deepest truths often lie waiting to be discovered.